Welcome to a very special YouTube and Facebook Live exclusive video brought to you by Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm the podcast host, Michael Davis. Join me later on in the show will be Ryan Frick from Tapouts and Touchdowns. We just got done with Out of Pocket on Tobacco Road Sports Radio doing that wrestling segment. It was a lot of fun. We're going to talk exclusively everything leading up to tomorrow's AEW Full Gear pay-per-view event. Send in your questions on Facebook and YouTube. We'll get to them. We're breaking down the entire card, top to bottom, bottom to top, and we'll be starting with the return of the Elite to All Elite Wrestling right after this. If anyone can guess where that little theme is from in the podcast episodes, there will be a little bonus thing for you. We're going to have Ryan Frick from Tapouts and Touchdowns here in the show in a little bit. Again, we just got done about 30 minutes ago with Out of Pocket with Michael Davis on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com, and WWBG 1470 AM. What a time that was. I have had a rough time with my voice this week, and so I had to make some hot tea. You'll see me sipping this from time to time. Brought to you by the Yellowstone National Park. And this Full Gear event is pretty stacked, as are all AEW pay-per-views. That's what you hope for in terms of AEW pay-per-views, because you have four. You're not WWE. You don't have, well, at one time they had 12, and now it feels like they have 20 pay-per-views in a calendar year for WWE. But AEW has four. It has the big four. That's all you need. It's as if WWE were to cut down to just Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, and that's not a recipe that WWE's went after. AEW trying to be an alternate product. They've given that, and they give these big four pay-per-views a big time feel. You got Double or Nothing, you got All Out, you got Full Gear this weekend, you have Revolution that will come up in about February timeframe. And let's get right down to it. Ryan and I left off the Out of Pocket episode with talking about this World Trios title match between Death Triangle and the Elite. And just a reminder, we're bringing out all our social media. You can follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. We're live on both of those. Okay. You can follow us on Instagram. The Instagram page has been booming as of late. And if anyone knows me at my other residence, booming's kind of a little pun intended. And Spotify. This episode will not be on Spotify. Okay. This episode will not be on Spotify. This is a Facebook and YouTube exclusive thing. We'll be back on Spotify for pretty much the Full Gear recap on Monday evening. But I want you to be a part of this experience too. I'm going to have Ryan in here. If you have a question, you're watching on YouTube, you're watching on Facebook Live, have any questions about AEW Full Gear, any comments even. If you disagree with one of us, I mean, we'll make fun of you, but feel free to put in the comments. Your comment can pop up on the screen and be a part of the experience with us. That's why we do these live videos. But the first match I wanted to cover was the AEW Trios Championship match. You have Death Triangle defend the titles against the Elite. And it's very interesting. If you haven't followed AEW the last few months, if you missed that CM Punk walked out on the company, was really suspended along with Kenny Omega, Matt Jackson, Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, a collective known as the Elite. This came after AEW's last pay-per-view where All Out happened. CM Punk won the world title. The Elite were the first ever World Trios champions. And then they got a Mio Scrum. And the next Wednesday on Dynamite, they're all stripped of their titles. And that very night, Death Triangle won the World Trios Championships and have held the titles ever since, I believe. I don't think they've lost it, not to my recollection. And now the Elite, their first ever match back, are competing for the titles that they were stripped of. We're joined right now by Mr. Ryan Frick from Tapouts and Touchdowns. Ryan, how's your voice doing after talking wrestling last hour?
My voice isn't what I'm worried about. It's my internet that I'm worried about. So, but no, I'm good, man. I'm ready to talk some Full Gear. It's honestly, to me, it's kind of one of the most I guess not highly anticipated, lowly anticipated pay-per-views that the AEW's ever done. So,
Really?
excited to get into it.
I mean, I still think there's a lot of good matches on this card and a lot of high ticket items. You got Saraya that we'll talk about in a little later on in the show, and you got the Elite's return. And I really wanted to pose this by you. Is it smart to have? I mean, we talked about this on Out of Pocket, but is it smart to have the Elite come back and immediately challenge for the World Trios titles, the same titles they were stripped of?
I don't know if smart's the right word. I would argue it's sort of like a makeup call, kind of like if you're watching a football game and somebody throws a PI and there was no pass interference. Later on in the game, they're going to get a makeup call where, they should have gotten one. They maybe should have gotten one. They did. So I think this is sort of I don't know, sort of a shot to the face to CM Punk that these are the guys that he called out after he won the world title, and then CM Punk's gone, and now these guys are getting the title. I mean, I think the plans were always there that the Elite were going to be the Trios champions, the initial Trios champions, and had the media scrum not taken place, they'd still be champions. So I don't necessarily think that smart, like not smart, is the right way to call it. But I mean, if AEW wants to go back to their plans, it's kind of like, again, a really sort of a bad comparison, but Jimmy Uso months ago, before they won the tag titles, got a DUI, and there was no discipline because they did not want to screw up the plans they had for the Usos and the Bloodline. So here we are, fast forward from what took place in the media scrum, and now AEW is just getting back on track. Jon Moxley wasn't supposed to be champion. I'm not trying to get ahead of ourselves. Jon Moxley wasn't supposed to be champion after that show. The Elite were supposed to be trios champions going forward. And I think with this pay-per-view, both of those corrections get recorrected on Saturday night.
So it sounds like you're taking the Elite to beat Death Triangle and win back the trio styles.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Death Triangle's a great team. I love the Lucha Brothers, Rey Fenix. I'm going to call him Pentagon Jr. because that's what I first started watching him as. Pac is probably one of the best wrestlers in the world, one of the most athletic cruiserweight type wrestlers in the world. But yeah, I mean, again, they weren't supposed to be champions. They were dependable. They were reliable. And that's what AEW needed at a time of uncertainty that took place after the media scrum. And I mean, for that matter, Pac was the first ever all Atlantic champion. So kudos to those guys. They've carried the torch that was sort of bestowed upon them by default. And they've done a good job with it. But the Elite are going to come in here and they're going to show everybody why AEW created these titles and why they were created for them.
They really were created for them, and I feel like Pac is a very underrated competitor, first ever double champion in AEW. But it'll be very interesting to see if there's any locker room backlash. You know, we've heard a lot of rumors, reports that there was backstage unease about certain things. I wonder what message it sends with the Elite. I believe you. Like, if I had to pick, it's the Elite all the way, winning the titles back. And I just don't see Kenny Omega, one of the best wrestlers in the world, period. Young Bucks, one of the best tag teams in the world, losing to Death Triangle.
I mean, and you mentioned Kenny Omega. Like, his return has been completely been overshadowed now because he was on TV for like 3 weeks back from an injury and then immediately removed because of what happened. So, I mean, Kenny Omega was the star for AEW from the time that, AEW was established. Like, we all knew Omega was going to get the title at some point. He was the best heel they had. outside of MJF, to carry the torch as a champion, a proven talent from what he did in New Japan. So yeah, like Kenny Omega being one of the best wrestlers in the world, it was a big deal when he came back, and we didn't see him that long. So it'll be interesting to see if, like I said, like I told you on your show earlier today, I just hope they don't put a mic in front of him after the show's over. Just make them pack their bags, send them back to the hotel, let them hang out with their families after the show. They don't need to be in an interview at a press conference after the show.
No media scrum for them. And y'all can be a part of the media experience today. We're doing a live video on Facebook and YouTube. So you can be a part of the experience. You can comment. Your comments can pop up on the screen. You disagree with one of Ryan and I takes. You have a question for us to answer. We're all into that. And what I'm pretty sure nobody expected was how over the Acclaimed were. The AEW tag titles are on the line tomorrow night, this Saturday, and I'm not a fan of booking this match. It's the Acclaimed versus Swerve in Our Glory. It's the trilogy. I don't think the Acclaimed should have lost at All Out, and I feel like Tony Khan regretted that decision, and he fixed it at AEW's Grand Slam event, but it feels like this feud's went a little over. I feel like they missed an opportunity to have another tag team like FTR. FTR versus the Acclaim would, torn the house down. Do you think it's a good idea to have the trilogy?
I mean, yeah. I mean, to your point, they shouldn't have lost the match at All Out. Like they were over like Rover. On my podcast, we talk about all the time where booking got it wrong, and they got it wrong. They shouldn't have lost, but it also gave them that redemption story arc to come back a few weeks later and actually win the titles. And so yeah, it's sort of the moniker that they always do after he comes out and raps is that the Acclaimed have arrived, and the Acclaimed have arrived, dude. Like they are one of the hottest tag teams in the world, at least in the States. Like it's sort of, if you go back to like late 90s WCW and see how over Goldberg was and see how over DDP was, like when the crowd is feeding you who they want to see, you put the rocket ship on them, and that's what they've done with the Acclaimed. I think it's sort of fitting that it's time for them to move on from Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland. Is it Swerve Strickland, Swerve Scott? I don't care. Yeah. I'm not trying to be ugly about it. I mean, it was really ugly the way I said it. But it's obvious that they're going to have a feud between the two of them after this loss on Saturday. And then you're going to get to see the Acclaim move on. I've got a feeling before we get FTR getting the AEW tag titles, because something that I've wanted to see, and I think everybody has wanted to see, is FTR become like the Ultimo Dragon of AEW, like having all the belts. They've got the tag team titles in New Japan, the IWGP World Heavyweight Tag Championships, the AAA Tag Championships, and the Ring of Honor Tag Championships. I think obviously you're not going to be able to go to NXT or WWE and take those titles, but you're going to eventually put the AEW title so that they're at least having all four titles before they start dropping them all. And you've got Wrestle Kingdom coming in January, which would be the right time, in my opinion, to drop the IWGP tag titles from FTR. But again, everybody wants to see them with all the titles on them. So I don't think it's quite time yet. I think we're going to go back to the Gun Club. The what is it? The baby asses, whatever you want to call them. The Gun Club's going to come out. The Gun Brothers. I don't think that ever really got the closure maybe that we needed. And now that they're part of the firm, you're going to get some stuff going on there. So yeah, I think it's time to move on after this match from Swerve in Our Glory. We're going to get the Acclaimed, holding on to the titles, retaining the titles, and then I think we're going to get them once again battling the Gun Club before moving on to FTR, and where we see FTR finally take the tag titles. And again, it's hard because both of these teams are babyface over tag teams, so it's really hard to let the Acclaim be the ones to take the loss from FTR. So it might not even be It might not even be the Acclaim that had the titles to drop into FTR. So we'll see.
Well, you also have to think, and this is why I don't fault Tony Khan. I don't think anyone expected All Out to happen and Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee, two beloved baby faces. They had just signed with AEW. They just got the tag titles. Everyone loves them. And then in one night, Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland become heels, or at least Swerve Strickland in that manner. And
Yeah.
I'm starting to see a split. Do you think the split happens this weekend between Keith Lee and Swerve? Is that the move they need to pull?
I think it's the move they need to pull. I don't know if they will. Yeah, it's sort of run its course. Like Keith Lee, I mean, now in fairness, Swerve had his stable in WWE. Keith Lee didn't. Um, Keith Lee came into the main roster and sort of floundered, had some decent matches with Randy Orton before he was basically sent home for no apparent reason other than that Vince didn't like him. So yeah, I think it's getting around that time to where like they're gonna have to split off. Keith Lee's gonna go back to being a babyface. Swerve stays the heel, and we sort of move forward that way. But you mentioned in one night they went from being heel to babyfaces. The crowd will tell you what they want to hear. The year that Daniel Bryan didn't enter the Royal Rumble, when 30 hit and Rey Mysterio came in, a career babyface got booed out of the stadium. So I think one thing that AEW does well is they listen to the fans, and they don't, at least ever since Cody Rhodes has been gone, they don't sort of like try to force the heel or babyface. Like MJF came out and was like, I'm not a good guy. Like stop cheering me. And then all of a sudden the fans are cheering him and he's eating it up. And who knows what we're going to see in the main event when it comes to MJF. But AEW does a really good job of listening to the fans and not, boxing people into babyface or heels. They let the fans decide who they want to see.
Which is why I feel we could get that FTR, the Acclaim match down the road. And hopefully FTR hasn't lost the IWGP tag titles. Wrestle Kingdom is going to look good with FTR there. Potentially Carl Anderson, who would have thought a WWE and AEW star would be in New Japan. You got Shinsuke Nakamura facing the Great Muta eventually. I don't think that's a Wrestle Kingdom. I think that's Pro Wrestling Noah. But if we're talking tag team matches, we kind of got to reference the Sting and Darby Allin match versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. And Ryan, I went to StarCast a few months ago when Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal teamed up against Ric Flair and Andrade. Obviously, there's no need to say who won that match. But what a great moment for Lethal and Jarrett's career. Probably, if you would ask them, one of the best honors of their career. I mean, they're not on the show, but I'm sure they would say that. And do you feel like they're trying to capture this energy from StarCast and from Ric Flair's last match with Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal? Because it felt really weird. It felt really weird when Jeff Jarrett, came and attacked Darby Allin and came in as the last outlaw. Because he was honestly the last person I thought I'd see in AEW.
Yeah, listen, that could be it, right? I mean, at least they've built the story to this point. Like that's step number one. You've got to, I guess, in pro wrestling these days, you have to have a reason to have like a grudge match like this. For whatever reason, I feel like AEW is trying to hold on to the last bit of TNA and pull it through AEW, because you got to think Jarrett, Lethal, and Sting were cornerstones of TNA, and I guess it's peak, right? Like Jeff Jarrett was a world champion for how long? King of the Mountain, like it was a big deal. And to your point, I never expected to see Jeff Jarrett in AEW either. Like he was named president of live events at WWE, and all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, like I never saw anything that he was no longer under contract, and all of a sudden he shows up in AEW. So yeah, I wouldn't say they're trying to capture the magic off of what took place at Ric Flair's final match, but for whatever reason, I think they're I mean, you got to think a lot of the AEW guys, a lot of the AEW originals got their careers started off in TNA. Kazarian, you got to think the first tag in TNA, and Christopher Daniels, obviously in Kazarian. The list could go on. I don't want to bore you with everybody was there. I mean, I think Sting, Christian Cage, but at the same time, it's just, to me, this match doesn't make sense. Like, what's the point in bringing Jeff Jarrett for like a one-off? He had just mended those bridges with WWE. Everything was on a good note, and like, I get he probably still wants to wrestle, but like, listen, Sting is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. He shouldn't be wrestling at this point. And he's done some crazy stuff in AEW.
He's done a lot more than I thought he would.
Oh, like, yeah. Oh, you mentioned the Great Muta too. Oh yeah. Well, off the stage, off the top of the stage. Like, it's just, he's done some crazy stuff. But you also mentioned Great Muta and Nakamura. Sting is actually getting a match with the Great Muta as well before he calls it quits. So I got to figure out when that match is going to be, because I don't want to miss that. But yeah, listen, like, you could argue one way or the other. I'm sort of indifferent because I'm indifferent about this match. I've been very adamant on my podcast that I'm not the biggest of Darby Allin fans. I don't think he's believable. I don't like his gimmick. I basically called him a emo skateboarding gimmick that has really good matches because he lets people throw him around like he's a brawling buddy. If you may not know what a brawling buddy is, but back when I was a kid, we had these little stuffed wrestlers that you could like elbow drop, and they would have like little sound boxes in them. So if you elbowed them, ooh, and they'd make noises and stuff like that. So he lets the bigger guys throw him around like a brawling buddy. Yeah. So
I have a brawling buddy.
Yeah.
and I love Jeff Jarrett. Every time I bring up Jeff Jarrett, I think of 2005. He was the NWA World Champion, and there's a photo somewhere in my house of Jeff Jarrett and letting me hold the 10 pounds of gold. I was like 6 years old, on the verge of 7 at the time. Like that's a cool moment. Like, he's a great person to meet, but it just caught me off guard with him coming. But I don't know about you. I feel like Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal are going 0-2 in tag matches this year. I don't see Sting and Darby Allin losing this one.
Yeah, to your point, like, it would make sense, right? Like, Darby Allin has been the guy, like the indie darling, like the new age Jeff Hardy, if you will, in AEW. So it would make sense to put Sting and Darby over. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Jarrett, like, especially if hypothetically, if this winds up being Jeff Jarrett's final match. Like, I don't know if he's the kind of guy who wants to eat the pin in his final match. So I could see it getting ugly and Jarrett pinning Darby Allin to finish this match. Like, that's the way I see it going. But again, no offense intended. I could really care less about this match.
And I don't know if this is Jeff Jarrett's last match. I feel like with him coming to AEW, he's still wanting to wrestle. And if you see on the bottom of the screen, we have Tapouts and Touchdowns host Ryan Frick with us. There's his Twitter. There's his Facebook. You can follow him. He's doing some great stuff. If you're enjoying listening to him, we'll have people listening live as we are. We'll have people going back and rewatching. But wanted to touch on perhaps a match that you should care about. Everyone should care about, because it is going to be good. It's going to be Chris Jericho defend the Ring of Honor World title against Bryan Danielson, Claudio Castagnoli, Sammy Guevara. And it's not lost on me, like, there's no real, like, story to this match, if that makes sense. Like, we've had the Blackpool Combat Club, we've had Jericho Appreciation Society brawling for months and months on end. But you just put these 4 guys in a ring, you know it's going to be chaos. You know it's going to be great wrestling. You know there's going to be your high spots. It's basically going to be a wrestling clinic happening all at the same time. But I ask, is there going to be dissension that comes from this match between either Jericho and Guevara or Danielson and Castagnoli that takes on
I mean,
a form of its
listen,
own afterward?
yeah, yeah, listen. So it's a fatal four-way. The world title of Ring of Honor is on the line. You're gonna see Danielson and Claudio go at it. You're gonna see Jericho and Guevara go at it. Um, we've already seen a song and dance with Jericho and Guevara with the Inner Circle. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I could see some dissension between Danielson and Claudio. Brian is he's sort of kind of gone out of the babyface character a few times in the last few weeks. So you may see him get really aggressive to try to win this title. But it's going to be your typical fatal four way. I mean, the story behind it, I mean, you basically nailed it. The story that's there is that you've got two guys from two factions in a fatal four way match for one title. This feels really Ring of Honor esque. So it sort of fits that this is for the Ring of Honor world title. I'm kind of curious to hear what you have to say, who you think was going to win this match. Because honestly, the one guy that I can't see winning it is Guevara, and he may be the one that actually gets it. So
I feel like Sammy's out in terms of the Ring of Honor title. And here's why, because if you think Tony Khan's trying to get this TV deal with Ring of Honor, how did they get the TV deal with AEW to begin with? You had Chris Jericho leading the charge. You had Jon Moxley kind of coming in, but Jericho was your guy. Like, you were pitching to the networks. TNT picked it up. And I feel like they're going to do the same thing with trying to get ROH on TV, except, I feel like Bryan Danielson's a big enough name where he could help get that TV deal. And William Regal's been outspoken about Claudio Castagnoli being able to carry a brand. Claudio always has been Ring of Honor World Champion, so it makes me feel like that's not the direction they're going. But the dude can speak 5, 6, 7 languages. Like, it's absurd. So
yeah.
I could obviously I don't think Sammy wins. We pretty much say that. I'm going Jericho. I think the Ring of Jericho era, the Ocho continues to live strong. Chris Jericho, just the king of reinventing himself. One of the best in the business at doing that. Do you think the Ring of Jericho era remains?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I didn't think they needed to take it off Claudio to put it on Jericho, but they did it. I think AEW is established enough for their TV contract as it is, maybe they don't necessarily need Jericho as much. But if they really did want to do something with the Ring of Honor, because apparently after it was all said and done, there were no real plans for Ring of Honor after Tony Khan purchased it. So if they really want to try to create a new brand, a la maybe like a feeding system like AEW's NXT, but it's an established brand like Ring of Honor, then I don't see why you couldn't put Jericho there. I also don't understand, I also wouldn't be able to comprehend that sort of a feeder brand in Ring of Honor to go to AEW would have your world champion be a guy like Chris Jericho, which would make sense as to why they would put it back on Claudio. But yeah, I'm with you, man. Like, it would be the perfect opportunity for Jericho to lose the title in a fatal four way because he doesn't have to get beaten for it. But that being said, that means that Danielson or Claudio is going to have to pin Guevara, and I have no idea who would. So yeah, give me Jericho in this one too. I don't see Jericho losing it in a fatal four way. I see Jericho winning or losing the title in like a one-on-one match with somebody like surprising. Like, I'm talking like Samoa Joe. I'm talking Wardlow. Somebody like that is who I think is going to take the title off Jericho, not one of these guys.
If you're thinking about, somebody like a Samoa Joe or Wardlow, I feel like Wardlow would be perfect if you're trying to get Jericho, get that TV deal, have it at a Ring of Honor event where Wardlow has lost the TNT title and, goes in, wins the Ring of Honor world title, and now he starts to become his self, because he's kind of been lost in the shuffle. He defends the TNT title against Powerhouse Hobbs and Samoa Joe, another multi-man match, if you will. AEW used to not do. I kind of like that vibe they used to give off, where it's one-on-one, that's your fight. It kind of felt UFC MMA-ish in that sense, but you know, we'll get our multi-man matches. We got Hobbs, we got Joe, and I mean, Samoa Joe turned on Wardlow here last couple weeks. I'm curious to see if this is a heel turn, like a full-fledged heel turn, or if this is just for the match. But I don't even see either of these guys walking out with the TNT title.
First of all, we are killing with the transitions because that was a total accident that I mentioned them, and that's the match that we went into.
I was like, Ryan,
no,
you were reading my mind, man. We're in sync.
Yeah. No, listen, Samoa Joe is a great heel. I don't think that this was just intended to get him the TNT title opportunity. This is a heel turn for Joe. He'll be a heel going forward. You know, whenever you get somebody new into a new company, they're going to be a baby face because the crowd's excited to see them. Then they have to establish that I'm glad you cheered me because you recognize my talent, but I'm a bad guy. And here I am being the bad guy that I am. If we're talking about Wardlow becoming a champion in Ring of Honor, taking another title, you know, Powerhouse Hobbs coming off of sort of a weak little rivalry with and I had his name at the top of my head and I can't say Ricky Starks. I could see Powerhouse Hobbs taking it, man. But again, this is another match that, like, on paper it sounds pretty good. But I haven't seen Wardlow pick up Joe for the Powerbomb Symphony. I don't think he can do it. Same thing with Powerhouse Hobbs, as far as Wardlow picking him up. So I think this winds up being like this is one of your surprise winners. I'm taking Powerhouse Hobbs in this match. Joe is the TV champion. I think Joe cost Wardlow the title, and then Wardlow will sort of feud with Joe for the Ring of Honor television title. But I think Powerhouse Hobbs takes the TNT title, and he takes it and sort of defends it for a while, and then maybe you get Absolute Ricky Starks back, and he's the one that takes the title off of Hobbs. But yeah, again, on paper, having big men versus big men versus big men seems like it'd be fun. But I don't know about this match. I don't have high expectations. You mentioned another multi-man match that AEW it didn't feel like fond of when they first started. It did have an MMA feel because they also talked about their AEW records that they've sort of gone away from now. So listen, WWE went through it. When you start going and just getting and hoarding all the talent that you can, you're going to wind up with a triple threat, a 6-man tag for the trios titles. Eventually, it's going to be an 8-man, a 10-man, a 12-man tag team match, playa a la Teddy Long. Like, that's where we're headed with AEW because all they're doing is hoarding talent, like WWE was. So yeah, man.
Will you ever see a 50, 60-man match like WCW tried to pull off that one time?
Listen, well, it was a couple times. World War III was my introduction to the Royal Rumble. I had never seen the Royal Rumble before. And when I saw World War, I say, okay, so I'm gonna take you back, and forgive me for the references, but back when I was a kid, there was no like internet where you could go on and find like a stream to get pay-per-views off of. Back in my day, you had pay-per-view channels that you could turn the TV to and hear the music or hear the sound from the pay-per-view, but all the picture was all scrambled. And so I would sort of listen to pay-per-views like I was listening to the radio with the TV on. And so I sort of listened to the first ever World War III match, and that was my introduction to a Royal Rumble type match. It was a 3-ring, 60-man, over-the-top rope battle royal, and the winner got to face the world champion at Super Bowl. So I would love especially when you've got a Survivor Series War Games with 2 rings, you could do like a super big Royal Rumble. Like they've already had like the world's biggest Royal Rumble when they did a 40-man one year. But I think they could pull it off. I think AEW could pull it off at this point with all the talent they have. You've only got about 9 or 10 people who could realistically win something like that. But yeah, I think they could do it.
Hey, whatever works, and you could start utilizing talent that you're not using. Miro. Miro's still left off this show. That's a surprising name, but there is a feud, and for every pay-per-view, there has to be this blood feud that you want to see the end of, and that's Jungle Boy versus Luchasaurus in the steel cage. You got Christian Cage in his corner. I know I said Cage a lot, and it's a shame that we don't have Brian Cage, in the mix here. Maybe Ethan Page, Hangman Page. If you've seen that meme. We got Saraya now. We'll talk about her in-ring return here in a couple minutes. But real quick with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus, I like Luchasaurus as a heel. And I don't know how long this feud goes. I don't know if it lasts as long as Christian Cage can get healthy and we get a Jungle Boy Christian Cage payoff. Or here's something I've thought about just before we went on air. I would not be surprised if Jungle Boy loses out this feud to Luchasaurus and goes through down a downward spiral and turns heel himself.
Listen, I like your optimism.
You had to take that in for a second.
Yeah, listen, it's a unique idea, right? I think Jungle Boy being one of the top baby faces in the company and having the plans that they probably have for him in place, it's hard to say that Jungle Boy can go over Luchasaurus in the steel cage, especially with Christian Cage on the outside. However, Jungle Boy's fast enough where if he needs to run away, he can. And one of the ways that you win a cage match is escaping the cage. Again, we talked about there needing to be an audible called when the Elite were suspended the night after they won the inaugural Trios Championships. I think there was an audible call here. I don't think the plan was ever for Luchasaurus to turn heel again. But with the injury to Christian Cage, they had no choice. In order to extend this feud in the hopes that Christian could be healthy enough to get that final payoff from Jungle Boy, they had to do something. And the something they did was turning Luchasaurus heel. I like Luchasaurus as a talent. There are some things that he does that are a little clunky and awkward. When you're a 7-foot luchador, that sort of thing is going to happen, right? So yeah, I don't see Jungle Boy turning heel here. I think if he does lose this match, I think he's going to be kayfabe hurt until Christian starts teaming with Luchasaurus again and actually in-ring competition. And that's when Jungle Boy comes back. A theory for me is that maybe Jungle Boy elicits the help of a giant himself in the form of Paul White. So you
Captain
get
Insano.
A team, a big, yep. You get a Big Show who's familiar with Christian, but can compete with Luchasaurus to sort of even the playing field. And I think within the next, and I hate to say it because it feels like it's been going on for 2 years, I think we'll get the final payoff with Jungle Boy and Christian Cage in about 3 to 6 months. And then we can finally put this to bed and Jungle Boy can maybe compete for the TNT title or the All Atlantic title. Maybe AEW will create another championship because they seem to be enjoying doing that. And maybe they'll create like a cruiserweight title because you got so much high flying talent. I can't even think of his name. Who's the guy he's in a tag team with his brother, but his brother keeps getting hurt. So he goes back to doing
Dante Martin.
Dante Martin. Thank you. Dante Martin is one of the most impressive wrestlers I have ever seen. He did a spot last week where he jumped, like he catapulted himself, springboarded off the middle rope and did not use his hands. Like the balance that takes. Like I've never seen Rey Mysterio do anything like that.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, when you got guys like Dante Martin and Jungle Boy that are smaller in stature that wouldn't be believable as world champions. And I hate to say that because I am a huge fan of Jungle Boy, and I absolutely hate the fact that his dad, Luke Perry, is not around to celebrate the success that he is having right now. But when you have guys like that, you're going to have some things kind of go crazy for them to go over. And I think, listen, I think he does. I think he does go over Luchasaurus here.
Really?
If Luchasaurus were to go over, the other scenario that I laid out plays out. But I think Jungle Boy goes over. I think Jungle Boy escapes the cage and gets away. And I'm not saying Luchasaurus turns on Christian Cage, but they sort of shift focus until Christian is healthy, and then Jungle Boy, maybe Jungle Boy goes for a title, and then Christian, a healthy Christian, costs him the title and says, I didn't forget about you running away from my giant Luchasaurus at Full Gear out of the steel cage because you couldn't take it anymore. Like I could see that playing out that way. So I like Jungle Boy to go over. I think that they'd be doing him a disservice to kind of put him, I guess, give him the L here. But again, anything can happen. That's the joy of pro wrestling, is not being able to actually figure out who's going to win before it happens.
Yeah, and WWE got knocked on a lot in the past about being a predictable, company. And I think there was a time where, you could look at the card and pretty much know where a story's going. And one credit to AEW, and WWE started this in a couple areas. They're allowing the story to take, a life of itself where you don't know where it's happening. I do respectfully disagree. I feel like it's set up for Luchasaurus to win, and the heel turn's not going to come now. It's going to come in a few months when Jungle Boy's like kind of getting that John Cena like vibe of like, I'm trying to be a good guy. I'm trying to do everything right. And, this is going to be like the John Cena heel turn that we never got, and it's not John Cena, but
nonsense. It's a great thought, man. I like your thought process. It works. So hopefully you can chalk the win up to yourself for this one. Maybe that's the way it plans out.
Hey, if we get back on here a year from now, things may have changed, things may have stayed the same, and I'll just remind you of this moment where I was like, "Hey, Jungle Boy turning heel," in the next year. In the next year,
a little note, yeah.
And
Jungle Boy loses, turns heel in 6 months. Got it. All right, cool. We're good.
All right, it's written on your hand, just like a girl would write on your hand in elementary school, middle school. Your hand. I could only be so lucky. Let's be honest. You see this mug here? Come on, cut it out. Get out of here. And speaking of lucky, Toni Storm, as much of a year, has changed for her. Being in WWE, having the pie all over her face in that feud with Charlotte, requests her release, saying she's not happy. And then a year later, she's with AEW. She is either engaged or married to Juice Robinson. Fun fact to point out there. And due to Thunder Rosa's injury, we have yet another interim champion. And yeah. And so we have Toni Storm versus Jamie Hayter as one of our 2 women's matches. And real quick, because let's be honest, this isn't the big women's match of the evening that we have at Full Gear. What's more likely? Is it Thunder Rosa being stripped of the title and Storm becoming the champion? Or is it going to be Toni Storm losing the title before Thunder Rosa can return, potentially this weekend?
Listen, I don't. Storm's not losing the title to Jamie Hayter. No disrespect to Jamie Hayter, with all due respect. She doesn't lose the title to Jamie Hayter. Obviously, there were rumors that there was some sort of backstage heat for Thunder Rosa. Some of the women didn't like working with her, and that's part of the reason why she was injured and had to relinquish the title. But yeah, I think if anything, you're going to get Toni Storm and Thunder Rosa facing off again, Thunderstorm, if you will. And then eventually the title winds up on someone else's hand that we're going to talk to in a minute. But yeah, again, not a match that I'm particularly fond of. And, if I may, for just a second, and indulge me, if you could indulge me for a second. I think Toni Storm's exit from WWE was a little I want to call it childish, but it didn't make sense. Like, I understand if you're unhappy at a job and you want to leave, but give the reason that you're just like, you know what, like something here is not right and I want to go. And Toni Storm used the platform that I wasn't getting the work that I deserved. I wasn't getting the recognition that I deserved because she was an indie darling before she went to WWE and NXT for that matter. Like, she was in a feud with Charlotte Flair. So you take a pie to the dome, but Roman Reigns took a can of dog food to the face. Like, I just don't like, again, with all due respect, miss me with that. Like, I don't like how I was being used. Like, you were in a feud with the world champion, with what may go down as the most title reigns in WWE history as far as the women go, with Charlotte Flair. Again, we can argue all night about inflated numbers with the titles there, but yeah, like, people were excited to see her go to AEW just because they remembered her in NXT and remember her from the Indies. Like, and they remember her OnlyFans page or whatever that she's doing. So,
hey, yo, it was poor timing. Like, the timing was really weird because she was scheduled for a match against Charlotte Flair to challenge for the SmackDown Women's title. And I don't know. Obviously, we don't know the full story. You know, just knowing Vince McMahon, I could imagine him just throwing an absurd like idea in terms of the women's division that she may have turned down. Who knows? She hasn't spoken now about that. I'm pretty sure she would have. But
yeah. I mean, listen, imagine Cesaro finally gets his push and gets a shot at Roman Reigns for the Universal title. And before he gets the title match, let's say on Survivor Series or even Money in the Bank, before he gets a title match, Cesaro asks for his release. Does that make sense to you?
No.
It wouldn't, because it doesn't make sense to me. And that's essentially what Toni Storm did. Now, again, with all the rumors behind the departure of Vince McMahon from WWE, there could have been more to that we don't know. And I think that's the point that you were trying to make.
Because I've also been going back and rewatching a lot of 2002, 2003 Raws and SmackDowns, and the absurd segments, and that was a good era for wrestling too. Like, you had the Ruthless Aggression era. It's the era I grew up in, and then you're having just we won't talk about that, but it's just
it was the beginning of the decline of the wrestling business for about 10 to 15 years is what it was.
And then somebody who takes credit for helping revolutionize the women's division in professional wrestling is returning to the ring this Saturday night. We have Saraya, formerly known as Paige in WWE, facing Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. I love that, especially since we're on YouTube, Facebook. People can see our lovely faces, see your Southpaw t-shirt, see the Duke hoodie.
Southpaw Regional Wrestling, baby.
Yeah, you had to change shirts the last 30 minutes to.
Oh, come on now. We recorded that other show. Like, no, yeah, you're right. I did have to change shirts. I want to make sure. I want to make sure people know that I own more than one T-shirt. So that's why I had to. And Southpaw Regional Wrestling. I don't know if you ever watched it. One of the most underrated things that the WWE Network ever put out.
So fantastic. So comedic. Thanks for calling me out for not wearing multiple shirts. But Saraya, Dr. Britt Baker, it's a dream match. I don't think we've ever expected to see Saraya, Paige return to the ring, especially after the incident with Sasha Banks. I believe it was a house show of all times.
Mm-hmm.
And, is there any concern for Saraya's health as she returns from you as a fan? We've seen Edge, we've seen Daniel Bryan come back from pretty serious neck injuries. And, if this is she's already been on record of saying, hey, this isn't going to be a weekly thing. We're not going to see CM Punk wrestling weekly. It could have led to Saraya's demise if she went that route based on what happened with CM Punk.
Yeah.
But are there dream matches for Saraya? How long do you think this lasts?
Listen, she's young. Like in wrestling terms, like she is, I want to say she's mid to late 20s. Like she's young because she started wrestling, I want to say 18, and she was in WWE when she was, I think 19 or 20. If you watch, if everything in that movie that The Rock produced was to be held factually accurate.
She
Like of
just turned
course, like
30. She just turned
okay,
30.
so that's still young. A lot of wrestlers don't hit their prime until their 40s. Like you got to think when Triple H was in Evolution, he was in his 40s. When I mean, you got to think Ric Flair. Ric Flair felt like he was 40 years old for 20 years. Like he was in his 40s and 50s in the late, maybe not 50s, but he was in his 40s in late WCW.
I
We got to
don't
think
mean to
Chris.
be I don't mean to be called sexist on my own show. People are probably going to flood the comments, but is that like the same with women's wrestlers? I can't think of any like
So
woman wrestler who wrestled like consistently in their like late 30s, early 40s. I feel like
so
their prime hits in the 20s.
no, here's the problem: is that the women who are wrestling in their 20s, not all of them, but the ones that we have seen that have wrestled in their 20s and maybe into their 30s get the itch to have families. And
Mm,
so, and that's nothing sexist about it. It's that some women, and even for that matter, some women want to be moms and some men want to be dads. And so when you have that, the power to make that decision for yourself, I mean, Becky Lynch spent a year and a half away from wrestling when she got pregnant and decided to become a mother. I think Medusa was in her late 30s when she was still wrestling in late WCW. Molly Holly's come back to wrestle. I think she may have had a couple of kids. Even Beth Phoenix had some children and she's wrestled. So I don't think that as women hit their prime in their 20s, I think it's that men,
life takes.
espe- yeah, yeah, and especially and especially in the wrestling business for decades, men have had to sacrifice their families in order to follow their dream of wrestling, and women, you can't really do it. So, having said that, Saraya being 30, she's still got a. I mean, if her neck holds up, she's still got some time to do some unfinished business. I think as far as how long she has, I think she's got the opportunity to win the title in AEW, which is why I said I don't think that Tony Storm loses the title to Jamie Hayter. I think if she doesn't lose it to Thunder Rosa, I think if with Saraya beating Dr. Britt Baker on Saturday and Tony Storm beating Jamie Hayter, that takes away Dr. Britt Baker's little like mini faction out the way. And now Saraya, who is a fan of Tony Storm is a fan of Saraya. They can have a friendly rivalry in which Saraya wins the interim world title, enter Thunder Rosa that wants to, hey, you didn't beat me for the title. I'm still champion. And then we get that match. And eventually somewhere down the line, someone like Jade Cargill will take the title off of Saraya, and then Saraya may or may not ride into the sunset. I mean, again, AEW likes to create titles with as many women's teams that they have and women friendships they have in AEW. We can
Oh,
see
it's
AEW
coming.
women's tag team champions.
It's
Yeah,
coming.
so Saraya could be a women's tag team champion with Tony Storm or anybody for that matter. So again, I'm worried because I know if the doctors just cleared her for the sake of it and she gets seriously injured, she could paralyze herself. And I don't want to see another Darren Drozdoff situation, especially with someone who is in her who's just turned 30 and has 2/3 of her life ahead of her. You know what I mean? So I love Saraya. I loved her when she was Paige. I remember the night that she beat AJ Lee on Raw on her first night on TV and won the Divas title. So I love me some Paige. She done unspeakable things to her NXT title, but we won't speak about that. But
PG.
yeah, I am a huge fan of Saraya, and as long as she is not sacrificing her health and her long-term health to return to wrestling, then I'm all for it. If she wants to follow her dream and do what she wants, as long as she can have a quality of life after it's over, that's all that concerns me. And it may not concern her, but as a fan, that's all that concerns me.
And I feel like Saraya's got to win this match here, right?
Yeah. You don't come back. You don't come back from a career-ending injury to lose. It's not going to happen. It just it doesn't. Like it's like asking Barry Bonds to come back and play one season of baseball, but he ride the bench. Like you
Yeah.
don't bring. And I'm just not referring. You're just not trying to compare Saraya to Barry Bonds, but it's like asking Tom Brady to come. Here's a better example because it actually happened. It's like asking Brett Favre to come back
Oh,
and play another season, but you're gonna sit back up Aaron Rodgers. That's what's gonna happen.
or you're
Like you
going
don't you
to
don't let Saraya. Yeah,
you're going
yeah,
to play
yeah,
for the Jets.
yeah, yeah. We'll give you to the good old Jets of the mid 2000s. Yeah, no, there's no way that Saraya loses this match. I don't care how it happens, but Saraya doesn't come back from all this nonsense and lose. It just doesn't happen.
And this is hard because I feel like Saraya wins. I do. I feel like this isn't 100% absolute though. I feel like there's a small chance that Dr. Britt Breaker gets like a fluke, like roll up win over Saraya, and then they just ride this for another 2-3 months with the two.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love your optimism that they're
You're telling me there's a chance.
listen. 1 in 100 million. I think you've got a better chance to winning the lottery, the Powerball, than you do to Dr. Britt Baker beating Saraya on Saturday.
Okay. I mean, I'll be sure to play the lotto this weekend. And we have people wanting to get to SmackDown. SmackDown starts in about 30 minutes from where we're recording it. But how can we move on without the big world title match? Before we get into that, if you've enjoyed listening to Ryan and all his takes today on Out of Pocket, right now on Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast Facebook and YouTube page, this is live. We're not putting this on Spotify. This is Facebook, YouTube exclusive. You can follow him on Twitter at Tapouts and TDs and follow him on Facebook, Tapouts and Touchdowns. Really good stuff. And here's where it comes to. You have Jon Moxley, you have Maxwell Jacob Friedman, MJF, Moxley celebrating today, actually. 10 years since his debut in the Shield. WWE's kind of not celebrating it for obvious reasons, but it's very weird how they're doing it. It's like,
Oh yeah,
yeah, let's celebrate 10 years of Roman and 10 years of Seth Rollins. And Ambrose is like, what the heck? I put my time
who's
into.
that guy? There was only 2 guys in the Shield, right? Like nobody remembers our third guy. Like no, that's no big deal.
Wasn't it
Was there
Cassius
some guy
Ohno?
named Ryback or something? Oh, Cassius Ohno. Oh
You
no.
remember those rumors?
Oh no, not Cassius Ohno.
Oh no.
That's almost as bad as Mark Jindrak being in Evolution instead of Batista.
It's
Oh,
amazing how those like little tidbits of like, what if it was Mark Jindrak? What if it was Cassius Ohno? Like changes history. And, thankfully, the Shield, one of the top factions in the world, and they're dominating their profession. We talked about it earlier today on Out of Pocket. Jon Moxley, MJF. Jon Moxley, kudos to him. He canceled his vacation once CM Punk went nuclear, won the AEW World title, and he's pretty much the flag bearer of the company right now. And then you have MJF, who, particularly on the mic, is, and I don't throw these names out pretty like easily, but you have to mention Ric Flair. You have to mention Roddy Piper in terms of his mic skills. This is, if you want to tell me like the top 10 promos of the year, I think MJF has 8 of them. Like it's pretty consistent. And he missed 3 months. Like it's one of those guys, and I feel like it's pretty evident he wins the world title this weekend. Should he have won it earlier, or is this the right time to catch heat?
Listen, I think this is the right time. Like you were able to build the drama of MJF wanting out and the real life contract negotiation, maybe sort of fantasized and exaggerated for TV purposes. Um, I don't think it would have made sense to put the title on him sooner because you had guys that needed to get the rub, at least the shot at the title. The Bryan Danielson, the Chris Jericho, the Moxley, the Hangmans, the Kenny Omega. So I don't think it would have felt it may have felt forced if they had put the title on him or sooner, because you know, as someone who he was feuding with the Inner Circle, and then he was feuding with his own faction. There's been no references to Wardlow since he's been back. So you had to sort of, if you want to call it long-term
Storytelling.
long-term booking. Yeah, long-term booking. You've got some stuff that you want to establish with MJF. That he's a coward, that he's conniving, he's manipulative, he knows how to find ways to win. And then when it comes down to it, there may have been some real life animosity because they kept bringing in WWE guys. You got Adam Cole, Christian Cage, who was sort of kind of a weird pick for me. A lot of old, Samoa Joe, the Undisputed Era with Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. So there might have been some real animosity that helped build his character into this like pretentious, self-absorbed, and slighted MJF. And so I think the biggest piece of confusion is the way that he came out with the firm to win the poker chip to get the shot at the title, because it made no sense why they put him with Stokely Hathaway other than to go through what's going now. To your point, I don't think.
I feel like they've explained that though, with MJF basically being handed the poker chip by Stokely Hathaway. William Regal's promo about you've been handed everything, you haven't had it easy, you're getting so upset over an email. Like that promo in of itself is just top notch from MJF and William Regal. Something like that's why we love wrestling. Like Ryan, I'm sure you share this. Like if you can feel something like that from a promo, from just two guys talking, like there's nothing like it as a wrestling fan. And so MJF's like, okay, I'm going to earn it. I'm not going to use this Dynamite Diamond ring, which brings me to the big idea. I mentioned this very slightly on Out of Pocket. I feel like he's going to use William Regal's brass knuckles and win the world title and use that animosity that has been built up by these other guys coming in, taking his spot. And, next year's Full Gear runs around, he's still champion. And then he's like, okay, I'm taking this title to Connecticut. I'm taking this title to WWE, join my good best friend, Cody Rhodes. And then Tony Khan tried to ramp up like, hey, MJF, you're wrestling every week or you're going to be stripped of the title and you're having to defend week in and week out until winter is coming, until the new year, whatever the case may be, to get the title off MJF. But this title reign's not going to start off clean. Like he's trying to trick people into happening.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on your podcast earlier. I think I like your idea that he uses the brass knucks there. I actually mentioned that there's a chance that you might see a heel turn from William Regal, that he's the one that hands him the brass knucks, or he might be the one that actually hits Moxley with the brass knucks. Oh. And as soon as I mentioned that on your show, all of a sudden I started seeing it everywhere. That's a big rumor that everybody thinks is going to happen with the promo that he just cut. That the biggest thing that the devil ever did was make you think that he didn't exist. Could William Regal be that devil?
William Regal's the ultimate villain. He has been his entire career.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's great. He's one of the best bad guys of all time. Very underrated, right? So yeah, I think to your point, and I wanted to touch base on this real quick. Part of a wrestling fan is one, not being able to predict what happens, and two, the wrestlers, the performers, making you feel something, be it the story they tell in the ring or the story they tell in the mic. If they can evoke a reaction from you that feels genuine, that blurs the lines of reality, that blurs the lines of kayfabe versus real life, that's what, to me, makes wrestling the art form that it is. And MJF in the last year and a half, maybe, does it every single week.
Every week.
If you remember the rivalry that he had with CM Punk, when he comes out and hugs CM Punk and says, you were my hero and you left, yada yada yada. Like you felt it, and then he turned on CM Punk and left him a bloody mess. Like that's what MJF is capable of doing. And regardless of whether or not we get the William Regal heel turn, the brass knucks instead of the ring, I think again, another audible corrected here. MJF gets the title off of Moxley. Moxley finally gets his vacation right before the holidays, and
Well deserved.
And I think
Well
I
deserved.
like, yeah. And I think your idea that like, yep, you're gonna have to defend it every week now because we're not going to make this easy on you. You said you wanted to earn it. You're going to earn it, and you're not taking this with you when you try to leave. So I did like that idea that he's going to have to be on TV every week defending the title, be it on Dynamite or Rampage. Yeah, I dig it. But either way, MJF wins the title this weekend, and I just hope it's as juicy as we all think it's going to be.
And when I mentioned well-deserved, obviously talking about Jon Moxley with his vacation, he's carried the company, celebrating 10 years, and he's been forgotten about. But MJF deserves this too. I've been very impressed with how he's progressed in wrestling so quickly. Like the Major League Wrestling version, the MLW version of MJF is not this MJF. Like he is, and he was good back then, and over time he's just excelled, and he's broke through that proverbial glass ceiling, and it feels right. It feels like his time, and it feels like time to run out of here. We got about 15 minutes before Friday Night SmackDown. We got about 15 minutes before Impact's Overdrive event. I might try to find that. We got Josh Alexander versus Moo.
Yeah.
Ooh, we got Bully Ray in a tables match. I know you're a Bully Ray guy, Bully Ray.
Listen, dude, I DVR Impact Wrestling every week. I know
you can't.
As the kids will say, no cap. Oh, I have Access TV.
real.
I'm on my cable company.
Dang it!
I've got it. I DVR it. Yeah, so I DVR Impact Wrestling every week. Ask me the last time that I watched an episode of Impact Wrestling was.
And that's
half
the thing.
Of my DVR is probably taken up from Impact Wrestling recordings because I never watched them and they just take up memory. So I didn't realize Bully Ray was back in Impact. That's interesting.
Bully Ray, Tommy Dreamer.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the ECW old timers. Now I do know that Brodus just won the NWA title. So
what a horrible. That I'm sorry. I know why they did it though. I know why they did it. They did it for publicity with his Fox show.
And
we may have cut out on Ryan. Oh, Ryan's back for this big hot Tyrus take. Maybe not. Leave it to Tyrus. Leave it to Bros Clay to shut down the show. We're having connection issues, but thank you so much, Ryan, for popping on. If you can catch him, Tapouts and TDs on Twitter, Tapouts and Touchdowns on Facebook. It's been a great time having you on the show. Full Gear tomorrow It's going to be awesome. Jon Moxley, MJF for the world title. Thank you so much for Ryan for popping on. It's been a great time. And thank you so much. We have a lot of stuff coming on our social media. I've been working with somebody really close to me to help me out with a few things in regards to the video stuff that hopefully we'll get to debut here in the next week or two. But with that said, this has been the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast, and you all have a great evening.